If you can just go down the line and tell us your name and which project you worked on and what you did on the project.
My name is Jonathan Duran, and I wrote Pumpin' Cool.
My name's Louis Gasparo. I starred in Pumpin' Cool, and I also produced it.
My name's Sean Antoine II, and I directed, edited, produced the film For Those That Live There about the migrant crises in the Cabrini Green neighborhood in Chicago.
Hi, my name is Eddie Castro. I wrote, directed, and acted in Shots. The inspiration, quite a few different things, but basically it boiled down to wanting to tell a story about someone acquiring their self-respect, their self-confidence, and I thought the best way to do that would be standing up to a bully.
Was your dad a cop?
My dad a cop?
Was it in any way based on personal experience?
No, not really. I mean, maybe an ex-girlfriend was a bully. That's... Thanks for laughing. But no, it was basically, I think everyone at some point finds himself in some kind of way where they become an adult and find that, hey, I have my place in the world, and you push back. You stand up and say, I'm not going to take this anymore. Whatever the case could be. It could be just, again, finding yourself. And again, that's why I thought was the best way to do it, is that moment when you say to yourself, like, I'm not going to take this anymore. I have this self-respect. I am who I am. And so, he finds that standing up to the bully. And then, of course, he's going to take it home and stand up to the biggest bully in his life, his father, and then take it on from there. So,
It's a powerful story.
Thank you.
Sean, what brought you to that subject matter? And I know you were working with it as part of your master's project, but if you could tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I'm from Harlem, New York, and I just recently started graduate school at Northwestern in Chicago. And my first assignment was to go into a community in Chicago in about a 2-mile radius and really just document that community over 3 months. And for me, I had heard about this area from movies like Candyman or shows like Good Times, really shows that really showed what the Black experience and Black family experience was like in Chicago. So when I got there, to my knowledge, I thought all these buildings would still be there. It'd be this vibrant Black community, Black businesses. But when I got there, I found out that this whole neighborhood had now been gentrified, destroyed, rebuilt, and even rebranded. And as I was there, not only did I experience this, very loud gentrification, just adjacent to all of that, I saw what's happening now, the emergence of migrants being in predominantly Black communities, and even more than that, their voices were being heard. Their presence was there amidst the gentrification and the sort of disappearance of Black narratives that used to exist in these spaces. And as I was there, I really wanted to make sure not only was I capturing what these people had experienced, but I wanted to sort of highlight these new emergent narratives that are at play in this country and throughout Chicago especially. And my approach just in post was really trying to showcase not only these different narratives and kind of bringing those all together, but even somewhat showcasing in the score, which I also produced, is this is somewhat of a horror story for some. And I had these dueling perspectives throughout the film, and that's what I came to make in the film.
Very important topics.
Yes.
The juxtaposition of the gentrification with the tent city.
Yeah.
And all of that.
Yes.
And then the disappearance of the Cabrini Green as we know it, really.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Louis.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
I knew about Don Juan, but I was really happy to hear this personal story, like what made you want to kind of make a film about this? And I think you've written a book about it, or
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about what made you kind of start to write about all of this?
Yeah, well, it started off with the book, and I also grew up in Harlem, and I was raised right around the corner in Astoria, Queens, and I found out about this place when I was a kid. But growing up in Astoria, I used to go to junior high school 204, same school as Nas.
We did a film program there.
Great. Yes, Oliver Wendell Holmes. So I used to go to school there, and I used to kind of travel further into Long Island City near Queensboro Plaza, and I would see these tags, and at first I couldn't read them, and then I started to realize what they said because I was starting to get better at reading graffiti because I was a graffiti writer since I was a little kid. So when I was 11 years old, I noticed these pieces on trains that I used to call marshmallow letters. I didn't even know that it said anything, and I used to think that the MTA was allowing people to spray paint on trains until I found out from my brother. He was like, nah, there's a bunch of punks with spray paint. And I was like, well, I'm going to become one of these punks pretty soon. And then, as I got older and I got better, I never knew who Don Juan was, but I heard of him, and he was basically a teacher for me from a distance. So I decided to find out who he was. And I asked the person, I said, what's Don Juan's real name? And they were like, Joe Palatella. So I basically, we're like traveling to now it's like early 2000s. So I went from 77 to 2000 in like 5 minutes or whatever it was. And so he told me his real name, and I looked in the phone book, and I found his name by Long Island City. So I was like, this has got to be him, because with that last name, because I never heard of anybody with that name. So I looked him up, I called him, and it took a minute for him to answer the phone, but he finally did. And through conversations with him, about a year and a half of conversations.
Do you know what a phone book is?
Yeah, so it's like having your phone book. And so I finally got in touch with him, and he would have conversations with me that lasted about a year and a half until he finally met me, but he would constantly cancel because I had no idea what was the matter with him. Because obviously he was dosed with a, crazy. He did it to himself, and it was a bad drug. He did angel dust unknowingly. He thought it was cocaine, which is bad enough to do that. But he did angel dust, and he totally flipped out, and he stayed within the flip out. So he was diagnosed with neuropsychosis, and when I met him, he talked the way I speak in the film, but I still didn't know what was the matter with him until a year and a half into the, tape recording him and interviewing him. He told me that there was a stipulation with the story, and I was like, what? You better tell me now. I've been writing for 2 years already. He finally told me, and he broke down, and I finished writing the book. The book finally came out, and he would constantly be like, Louis, my mother wants to know when we're going to make money from the book and all this stuff. And I was like, dude, there's no money. The book just came out. So I had to explain it to his mom. And subsequently, in 2014, when the book came out, he died in 2016. So 2 years later, when my second book came out, he passed away. And I've been working with Eddie Duran in Queens Public Television for years already. And I told him about the book, and he showed the book to Jonathan. And Eddie, the director, and Jonathan both wrote the screenplay. They were so enamored with what I wrote that they were like, we could make a film out of this. I'm like, are you serious? And so they took the book, they read it, we had meetings about it, and they were like, you could play Don Juan. And I didn't even think about that at all. So I was like, that's interesting. So we, put some fake hair on my head, and I grew my beard, much to the dismay of my girlfriend. So I grew my beard, I, fixed up my hair or whatever, and I totally, became him, because that's exactly how he used to act. And none of that story is false. It's all a true story. One creative, what's that word? When you change the real story to creative what?
Creative license.
Yes, creative license. Thank you. Nice hat. So the creative license that I took was when my brother passed away. That didn't happen like that. So we just changed that a little bit. And from then on, we would just been showing the film, and if it wasn't for Eddie and Jonathan really getting involved, and because they wrote the script, and the script is different from the book, although it's in chronological order as to when, and what happened. It was amazing to me. My son plays himself. He plays me when I was a kid. My nephew plays my father. So it was really like a close-knit crew. And Long Island City was the location. So everything was built already. And Don Juan is from Astoria. He was a rock and roll kid, an Italian guy. And he was actually a nice guy. And he was actually really funny. I used to imitate him, and he would crack up laughing. And it was really good to know him. And it's not only a story about a graffiti artist, it's about an artist who happened to write graffiti, and he was a person, and he had a lot of
friendship.
Oh yeah, I became friends with him. I became his best friend. That when I would leave him, he would say, "Can we hang out for like another 9-10 hours?" And I was like, and I did hang out with him for hours and tape record him and joke around. He would smoke his pipe. And, I even drove him around to places. He was very sheltered when he was young. But like I said, he was a teacher from a distance to me, because I started writing graffiti when I was 11 years old, right in the schoolyard of PS 166. But it was all like kind of copying what he was doing, because that was the train station that I would see was 36th Avenue or Broadway. So the Double R used to go by, and he was what they call the king of the Double R. So I just looked at it and I was like,
I'd read about kind of how like each team had, like, there was tag teams that had their own like territory. And
oh yeah,
kind of like a tag war, if you would.
Yeah. Although I never got involved in any kind of graffiti wars, I wouldn't go over anybody because I knew what the codes were. But Don Juan was from Astoria, and he wrote on what was called the Double R back then. Now it's the N. Now it's the N. So I also wrote on the Double R and the BMTs. So Don was the best guy in our neighborhood. So I just saw him as the best guy, and I said, I'm going to try to do what he does. And I became really good. So I was kind of known.
Your own style evolved.
Oh, totally. For me, it was like a stepping stone from him to Dondi to guys like me. So like I said, he's not just a graffiti artist. This guy was a really great illustrator, photographer. All the photos in the book were taken by him with a 35 millimeter camera. So he what's the word? He left graffiti and became something else. He was also doing magazine covers, album covers, design work. So he was way more than just a graffiti artist. Not that that's not enough.
As many are,
right? Because I write graffiti, but I'm also an abstract artist and a cartoonist and whatnot, graphic designer. So I'm an actor. Thank you, Jonathan. Jonathan's also a great actor himself. But anyway, enough about whatever it's about. But here's Jonathan.
Jonathan, do you want to say kind of how did you feel about taking that work and adapting it into a screenplay? How did you tackle that?
It was a lot of things came together. Me and my dad knew Louis for 10 years, and it's a great book. But I think the angle that me and my dad really kind of like hooked into was this idea that graffiti, a lot of people kind of sum up graffiti with hip hop. And graffiti, it was a huge culture before hip hop. So we saw Don Juan as kind of like a intro to this world of graffiti before hip hop. And that's we're working on the feature, and that's kind of going to be what this feature centered on. Is in the 70s there was graffiti, and then Basquiat kind of had not a lot, but he was in that scene where hip hop and graffiti merged. So we saw Don Juan as a kind of a good conduit into that story. So that's why we took the project.
Can you tell us about kind of 5 Points and your involvement with that, and kind of?
Whoa, 5 Points. 5 Points started out as the Fun Factory, and in like the early 90s it was the Fun Factory, but then in like 98, 99, even earlier than that, like 95, it turned into 5 Points, and it was a great place because you could go there with like 25 cans of spray paint and just go crazy and do whatever you wanted to do.
Does everybody know what 5 Points was? So it was a
It was
It was a area with like a few buildings.
It was a couple of buildings in Long Island City by Court Square, and the owner of the building allowed graffiti artists from all over the world actually to paint on it without, a cop could be right there while you're painting graffiti or whatever, and you wouldn't get in trouble. So it was a great venue to explore and to express, and you felt free.
It was like a graffiti hub, basically.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they demolished it, and now it's like luxury.
Exactly. So the owner of the building took it upon himself to, graffiti a lot of times is used as a tool for gentrification. And so they had the artists come in, paint the wall or walls for a bunch of years, almost a decade. And then he decided to get rid of it. He whitewashed it all and broke the buildings down. And now they're $1 million condos. And so 5 Points was a great place, and I knew it was going to happen, and I knew it was going to suck, and it does. They got rid of it, and it was a great place for artists from all over the world. It became a mecca.
No,
there's a couple of new spots like that. Bushwick has a wall like that, and then there's a what's that?
Brooklyn Bridge.
The Brooklyn Bridge, Bushwick walls. There's some places downtown, but 5 Points. There's nothing else like 5 Points like five Points was. Right. The Museum of Graffiti is in Miami, Florida, but I know people that are trying to get one in New York City, which is where it should be, because the phenomena of graffiti from New York City, it went all over the world. And I mean, even in this movie, some of the movies that we saw today, like the movie, it looked like it was in Africa. If you look in the background, there was graffiti on the wall, and that straight up comes from New York City. And, there was hip hop in the movie too. And that's another New York thing. So, the meeting of New York City graffiti and hip hop became this worldwide phenomena. And it just goes to show, that things start out in the street, get bigger, and become this worldwide thing. And guys like Don Juan were right there when it happened.
Right. And then they often get forgotten as it
totally. If I didn't write this book, Joe Palatello would have been, dust in the history of New York City, because he was sick. By 1978, he became a recluse. He wasn't coming out of his house, and no one knew who he was. And I found out about him by it was kind of a fluke. A friend of mine knew who he was, and so I, looked into it, because it was somebody that influenced me. So it's like writing about Reggie Jackson or something. Right. If you're a baseball,
to find your hero.
Exactly. So I found him, and I wrote about him, and at the time I had no idea about making a film about it. It was Jonathan and Eddie who, by reading the book, saw this whole picture in front of them, and I was like, yeah, let's do it, and we did. 2.5 years later, and now we're in film festival. We're in some other ones as well. So, it's been a thing, and we keep rolling. And, we're on to another project as it is right now, which is, it's very difficult. And I give kudos and props to everybody else that's making their own film and doing their thing, because if you don't do it, you can't wait for anybody else to do it for you. You have to just build it and make it, You
want to give it back to Sean? Off of what Louis was just saying, I know we were talking outside about kind of making your own projects and just keeping yourself going. What are you working on now? What's your next project?
Yeah, right now I'm actually working on a feature documentary. I worked on this short documentary called Kingdom. And it actually just filmed in this last film festival this year.
Yeah, I was there.
Oh, you saw it?
Kingdom.
Yeah.
Harlem.
Yep.
Yeah, that was you?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Sir Evil.
Oh, word.
Yeah.
That was my boys, Jamal and them.
Yeah, Jamal Hodge. Okay.
No, well, I'm glad you was there. I actually couldn't make it. I was just flying in from Chicago, but that film...
You guys won.
Oh,
Audience Choice.
Oh, it did?
Yeah. I think
look at it. Look, it's spreading the good news. Look, see? Nah, I appreciate that, brother. My bad. But yeah, that project was a labor of love. You was talking about just, the need to make films. I made that film with no budget. I just brought out my Sony A7S, and I was like, I'm going to spend time this whole summer trying to figure out the untold histories of my community. And yeah, through that, I was able to find archival footage from dating back to 1984 that people had on VHS tapes in the projects. And I'm developing that project into a feature documentary about
how that court and where it's situated in Harlem, and specifically for that community, it serves as a sacred ground. And their preparation and executing it for the last 40 years, it's some sort of like tradition and even ritual for this community. And in times like now, 2024, so many of these things in the community are disappearing. And this is still one of the foundations that still allows people from the community to come together, celebrate, enjoy their summer, and they're doing it through the sport of basketball. So I'm developing that into a feature documentary now.
Wonderful. What are you working on?
What am I working on now? There's a few things I have in mind, a few things I'm trying to write, including starting to write a feature that was partly inspired by my beautiful girlfriend here, Rachel. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna take the next few months or so to write that about kids growing up Dominican in the '80s. A lot of really cool themes there about what it means to be an American, what it means to be a first generation American here in this country, and what all that means. You know, living in the grander culture, but also trying to retain the past culture of your parents, um, and also just being completely unknown, you know, as to who you are and what others think you are. You know, growing up Dominican here in New York, people would just naturally assume I'm Puerto Rican, and it was, you know, I didn't really know what to think of it back then as a kid. You know, I just thought like, why don't people know I'm a Dominican? You know, people didn't know. Now you know because of baseball players and because of, you know, travel and all that. But so really that's what I'm writing right now. And I did write another short. Hopefully I can maybe film that sometime later this year, November or so. So good thing one of my producers from Shots is here, Paola, so we can talk about that. And and I'm also gonna have to talk to one of my stars from Shots, Mateo. There we go. Um, so hopefully maybe we can you know, work together again on it, but we'll talk about that later. But those are the two things right now I've been working on. The feature and another short. So
And what would you give, you know, a lot of our festival games is aimed at youth. What would your best advice to youth who want to make films be?
go out there and shoot as much as you can. It's so much easier nowadays with the phone and with so much editing software out there, some free stuff out there. I can't even imagine trying to do this, you know,
That way
20,
have
30 years ago. Yeah, exactly. Trying to go to an editing bay and actually cut the film and everything else and develop it, and just so much easier now. So I I really can't even imagine what things are going to look like 10, 15, 20 years from now, when it'd be so much easier just to cut things together. I mean, like on the fly, and just like there's going to be so many different styles out there, so many different modes that are just going to come about through the editing. I mean, we saw it with YouTube and how like the YouTube editing, how it's like trying to catch you, right, with the quick edits and all that. You can imagine with, you know, doing it on your phone, how much, you know, different it's going to be. So looking forward to that. That's, yeah, like I said, you get out there and shoot, put things together, you know, learn how to sync things and put music and create your own art.
Sean, same question.
Yeah, I would say advice for anybody. I think we're all filmmakers. If you haven't made a film yet, that's the thing that's holding you back from claiming that title. The
I
biggest,
love that.
yeah, that's we're all artists in our own right. It's just about whether or not we choose to create. And I would say the biggest thing I would say for youth, older filmmakers, anybody that's interested is watch more movies. Watch the stuff that you may not even find yourself usually watching, and that'll allow you to sort of find new ways to tell the type of stories you'd like to tell. And even more importantly, it'll allow you to hopefully experiment and grow. So, yeah, watch more movies, watch independent films, and build that confidence to go out there and create.
Love that. Lou, if you want advice to filmmakers or advice to artists.
Artists, filmmakers, and creatives, anything that, anything that's creative that you want to do, it's got to be you that does it. If you want to make films, get a camera, go make a film, like assemble your own team. If you want to draw, get paper, get a pencil, start drawing, go to museums, look at Rembrandt. You want to start tagging up, there's plenty of tags out there. Copy it and draw. Anything that you want to do creatively could be done. It's just that you got to do it, and don't get sideswiped by people's negativity. If you believe in it yourself, that's enough for you to say, I'm doing this, because everybody that's ever done anything was always put down before they actually tried to do it, which it kind of discredits you, and it kind of like makes you not want to do stuff, which makes you should do it even that much more, because there's a point in what we all have. I think that being an artist and being creative is a blessing, and you have to take that blessing and do the most that you can do with it, because there's so much other BS going on in the world right now that it's not a bad thing to be involved in music, art, drawing, acting, dancing, whatever it is. That the expression is what is necessary for the human to you have to be able to express yourself no matter what it is. If you're an artist, that's even better, because then you have other people looking at your stuff and they could come off with something that inspires them. So get inspired, study, go out there, do stuff, because you can do it, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't, because if they tell you that you can't, it means that they could not.
Right. They're just projecting.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, just, go out there and do it, because you're gonna get better every time you do it. And yeah, don't listen to the negativity, because there's gonna be a lot of that. Some people can't even help themselves. They're just negative.
Crash the system too.
And
Are you naming people to it?
No, we have something coming up on TV, so I told him make sure you mention that.
Oh.
Gotta get the plugs in.
And find yourself a mentor if you can, someone who has been there and who cares about you and doesn't want to see you make mistakes, because you can. I just saw Denzel say this. He said, "Don't confuse movement with progress," or something like that. And I was like, yeah, because you can be in the same place for 10 years, and it's the people around you who are like keeping you there, and they're just not recognizing your value and not giving you enough to do. So find yourself a mentor if you can, who will grab you out of those situations and direct you where to go. That's where I'm at now in my life.
You didn't plug it.
Give your plug.
I'll do the plug. Well, since we're both actors and producers and whatnot, we stumbled across a television show that actually stumbled across us. It's called Crash the System. It's on Tubi, and we're both in it. I'm in season 2 that's going to air like any day now, and then we're both going to be in season 3. So that was a luck, but it just goes to show that if you're not in it, you're not going to get seen. And it's not about being on TV. It's about doing what you think is the right thing for you to do. Always on going on auditions, always trying with plays, with readings. So putting yourself into something that's creative in this genre, it's got to be you that puts yourself in it for you to be found out about. And that's what we're both doing. And that's what my next project is. The second season and the third season of a show called Crash the System. It's going to be on Tubi. Plus, there's another Don Juan escapade that's in the future, to be filmed, and we have some ideas and what to do, because Don Juan, he had about 3 books in him, because I could have kept going with this guy, but it takes money. It takes money, and it was so low budget, no budget, that we wound up compressing like a decade of stories into like 2 years of work and then a lifetime of living it. Yeah. So it's just, believing in yourself and continuing.
Love that. Thank you, everybody, for being